Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Waypoint Coffee Corner. Today, we have a special guest back with us, Joemel Delossantos. We're
Hello.
good friend of mine, and
Aw.
we're going to be talking about some of the lessons and reflections that we've learned during COVID. I think that it's really interesting. You'll get to see behind the curtain a little bit, probably,
Hmm.
regarding what it means to be a young pastor during this time,
Hmm.
what it means to shepherd people, and just kind of what I can tell you is that both Joemel and I have been in the trenches in the various forms and ways that that can be. Uh, Before we get started, just to remind everyone, make sure you like and follow this stream.
Yeah.
Make sure you like and follow this Twitch channel, I should say. Like and
Wow.
follow us on Waypoint or on Instagram and Facebook. You can find all of our handles there. You can also find Joemel on Instagram at the various handles under his name as
Yes,
well. So,
I am there.
to kind of find something random to chat about a little bit before as I get all of our levels squared away. Uh, Joemel,
Yes.
my wife wanted to see your snowball. Can you show
Oh,
that off
yeah.
real quick?
Yeah. This is what I got going. Yeah, I misspoke. It's not a blue Yeti. I wish it was, but this is my setup. Actually, no, I have a nicer sound system, but Chris and Brent have my interface, so we're limited to this today.
Got it. I mean, the basically any desktop mic is going to sound better than a gamer mic or
Oh yeah,
inline uh, you know
for
headphone
sure.
mic or something like that. Um, this morning, and we're at 11 today rather than 10, and the
Yes.
reason for that is because you had We Pray San Diego this morning.
Yeah.
You want to tell me a little bit about that and how that was and what was going on with everything?
Sure, yeah. So this was actually my first year ever even hearing about it. So you probably already know more about it than I did. I was just asked by a pastor friend. He said, "Hey, it's actually this is a cool short story. God opened up a lot of doors at Mount Miguel High School recently, and I had an awesome opportunity to kind of serve as like a pastor partner for their freshman football team. So I was at Mount Miguel, I was praying, and then I get a call from a pastor friend, a senior pastor friend, and he goes, "Hey, do you know anybody at Mount Miguel High School? Like, do you know any of the staff there?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm literally on the football field with the football coaches, and yeah, like I know the principal. Yeah, I'd say we were okay here." And he pitches this whole We Pray San Diego thing. And I've literally never heard of it, but it sounded awesome. Something sponsored by the Rock Church, 7,000 people last year all around San Diego praying at schools. And I'm like, I want to be a part of it. Why not? Yeah, let's do it. Talk to the school. School gives us the okay. Hand us a key to the gate so that we could get in case if the gate wasn't already open. And I'm like, that's favor. That's just God's favor. Like, that's awesome. Like, whenever a school gives you a key, that's just such a
It's a good
special feeling.
thing.
Like, yeah, it's a great feeling for a youth pastor, just knowing like there's the trust and the favor of God. Um, so it was my first time being a part of it, and I will tell you there was unfortunately a little bit of a miscommunication, and they did not add the name of the school on their prayer list on the list of schools. I double checked; it wasn't my fault, thankfully. So there was a little miscue on there, which is fine, you know. So I got there, and there was just like me and my wife and our intern. So we prayed there for half an hour, and then the next half hour, I knew there was a school where there were people
Mhm.
from a different church who had been doing this for a long time. So I was like, let's go pray with them for the next half hour. So we booked over to Bancroft Elementary, 2 minutes down the road, and we just prayed over our city, prayed over the schools, and it was a good time.
That's pretty neat. That's really cool that you're able to participate in that, and just
Yeah,
knowing some of the doors that have been opening over at
absolutely.
Mount Miguel. It's super awesome to see, and it's rad to see God work.
Yeah.
Um, I I want to spend some time today just kind of seeing how you're doing and seeing how things have been before we kind of talk about
Yeah.
our big lessons, our three big lessons
Yeah.
that we've we've both learned and experienced during COVID. I will say, when I was thinking about this, narrowing it down to 3 was really difficult. Because anytime that there's any sort of adversity, I think you learn a lot, and you learn a lot of things. So and for me at least, this list isn't exhaustive. It is more for talking points and those types of things as well. So, how you been? How you holding up? How's you and your wife? You just celebrated your 2nd anniversary, right?
We did, yeah. 2 years of marriage, and it's crazy. It's 2 years of marriage, but we've only been in the same country for like half of that. So it's a special thing. I'm glad you're asking me how I'm holding up today and not like a few weeks ago, because I'm sure it's been a roller coaster. If you'd asked me this question on a different date, it might have not been a good answer. But at this present moment, by God's grace, holding up all right. I was a little bummed out to hear about some Padre injuries last night. But it's a good thing when that's the worst thing on your mind for the day.
Absolutely.
But, at this moment, we're holding up all right.
For those who don't know, well, for the Waypointers who are watching, I've been getting into baseball. I've been following baseball.
I'm proud of it.
It was more of a it was a twofold thing for me, which was my son was enjoying watching it and like throwing a ball around and that type of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then the second part was I was thirsty for sports.
Aren't we all?
When the NBA and baseball came back, I was like, well, looks like we're doing these two. So
let's double up. Yeah. Not the NHL?
Not as much. Much. I enjoy watching hockey. Don't get me wrong. It's just I know even less, and I didn't have that personal. My son's super into this right now.
Yeah.
Connection, and then it turns out the Padres are super good. So
surprise.
That's. I mean, like everything kind of coincidentally all works together. Well, not coincidentally, but it's super cool. So. Clevinger's out indefinitely, right?
Oh man, I don't. How much time do we have?
You get 1 minute to share your Padres baseball thoughts right now. Ready, set, go.
Right now, I don't know if these are real injuries or if these are Jedi mind tricks that the organization's playing on their opponent. But in the best case scenarios, I'm really excited. In the worst case scenario, if these people who they're saying could be hurt are actually hurt and miss some playing, like the pitcher's the quarterback of the game. And I mean, football's different than baseball in the sense of you have a different pitcher every other game. But if we really are missing Clevinger and Lamet, it's like playing 2 games without Tom Brady, or it's. I'm nervous. Like I'm a small breakdown. But if it turns out that these are just some Jedi mind tricks and these guys are actually more okay than they're leading it on to be, because if it's working on me, it'll definitely be working on whoever they're playing against, and they're probably wondering who are they going to face. If we have these guys healthy, I think we have a really good chance to get deep. If they're not healthy, I could see us losing in the first round. That's my take.
All righty. Well, we won't make this a full Padre baseball podcast. We could do pastoring
one day
sports sometime. That sounds like it's doable. But let's do this.
I'm afraid I might talk too much.
I mean, whatever.
What are podcasts for?
Yeah, right. So let's do this. I think that having walked through this whole time with you, I think that it's undeniable that this last 7 months or so, because I know that at least for me, you could feel kind of the wave of COVID coming. You could hear the rumblings of it back in February.
Yeah.
And what the implications of it and everything were.
Yeah.
but I think that it's been one of the more trying times in ministry that I've ever been through. At least on a larger scale. I've been through some pretty difficult stuff personally, but like it's one of those strange things where it's like we're all unified in it, that we're all going through it.
Yeah.
But then it's also generated a lot of division, all sorts of stuff, right? Like, and then you put the election season on it, you put the race riots on it, you put, all this different stuff, all the economic issues, the struggling students, the kids trying to go back to school but struggling at home to study, and just all these different things. We've been through a lot in the last 7 months or so, and I think that's we're going to take this time right now just to kind of pause and reflect and just discuss some of the different lessons that God has shown us during this time, and the point of this is to be beneficial for the listener too, that we can use this as a mile marker, so to speak, to we can use this as a mile marker, so to speak, to just take an inventory of where we're at, and to move. I want to say move forward, but really to take an inventory of where we're at, see what God is doing, and then look forward to, we might have another 6 months of this. We might, I hate to be the speaker of truth, but that's definitely in the realm of possibilities here. That's not even a fringe thing to say that this could last a year.
I would say there are some groups of people who think that saying it's only going to be 1 year is a vast understatement.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so anyway, we're going to be dealing with this for a while.
Yeah.
I know you live with some high risk folks. I live with high risk folks, or high risk daughter, a high risk daughter. We are going to be concerned with this for a while, and oftentimes our churches are filled with people who are high risk, just by age. And we're going to be dealing with this for a bit, and it's one of those things that I think is it's important to see what God is doing, and to see what kind of lessons are being learned, and how we're growing, and those kinds of things. So I'm going to kick it off to you first. What is the first lesson? The first thing as you reflect on COVID and this time of ministry, what's one of the first things that you've learned?
All right. So in baseball, they call this the top of the inning. So leading off.
I mean, I can lead off if you'd like to.
No, I'm just kidding.
In backyard sports, they call this
going first.
Going first.
Yeah, I dig it. No, it's so funny that you say that. For a lot of people, it's like, oh, we're coming at the tail end of this, and that's how a lot of people kind of view this whole situation. But like you said, I chuckled a little bit because you said, like, who knows, there could be another 7 months. I was at the barbershop the other day. I was at a Filipino barbershop that I've been going to since I was a little kid. Very, very COVID sensitive. Everyone's got the masks and the glass dividers and everything. And I chuckled because while I was there, Filipino culture is very. I'd say we were always a little germophobic, and I feel like this has kind of like pushed everything over the edge for a lot of us. And someone, there was one of the customers who wasn't Filipino. One of the clients was like, "Hey, where's the donuts? You guys usually have donuts out every day. I look forward to the donuts." And one of the ladies was like, "We can't be serving donuts during COVID." And the guy said "Oh, well, hopefully maybe next time I come back, this COVID is over." Just kind of maybe probably by the next time I come back in next month, this will all be done. And one of the barbers,
the sun goes down, and maybe it's gone.
Yeah, and the donuts will be back.
Right.
And the barber was kind of quietly said to herself, just I don't think we're putting donuts out for 5 years. And I was just kind of in my head, I was thinking there's such a big spectrum of what people expect this to be. And I say all that to kind of bring me to my first point, was because my first thing that I feel like God has been showing me in this moment, Nate Landis, our boss, kind of touched on this the other day, was when this whole thing began, our minds and our hearts were just set to, when this is all over, what am I going to do? Like, we were just in this waiting mindset of like, okay, so when this is over and things are back to normal, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Like, I can't wait. We were just longing and seeking for, like the only date in our mind was like, when is everything going to go back to normal? And then I feel like the first big lesson that God is showing us showed me at least, it was seek me in the moment. Like, seek me where things are right now. Don't put me on break. Because I got to be honest, like that first month, in my mind and in my heart, I just kind of put everything on hold. Because just like everyone else, we really believe like this is just going to be a month. And that first month, I was just like, I think everything took a timeout for me. Like I was at my spiritually like weakest point, because in my mind I was just like, everything's out of whack, everything's weird, and I just kind of took a break from everything. I'm like, I don't want to think about ministry. I don't want to think about. I don't even know if I was reading my Bible as consistent that first month, because I was just like, when this all changes and everything goes back to normal, then I'll go back to normal. And of course since then it's just been like, oh well, maybe in a few more months, maybe by the end of the year, maybe by this. And the problem is when we're just constantly waiting for like the circumstances to fit our expectations, we're not seeking God the way. Like, one of the first lessons that God had to show me was, even if this is how things are going to be for the next, like I said, some people think it's going to be the next couple of weeks. Some people think it might be the next couple of months. There are people who believe it's going to be like this for the next couple of years.
There's also people who think that it's not even really existent anymore. So
yeah, well, that's a whole other, and of course there are people who just are already over it. But whatever the state is, I've learned that I need to be just as desperate in seeking God and searching for what God is doing, and searching like right now, in every moment, and just having that dependence and that desperation and that just intimacy, like not letting the circumstances affect that intimacy, and just seeking God in this moment, the way things are right now. Like, what is God trying to show? What is God trying to teach me? This is not God did not take a break. Because I got to be honest, man, when this first thing started, I was it almost felt like in my heart, like God took a break. Like, I mean, I obviously never said that, but that's just kind of the way my heart was treating it. Like, yeah, like 1 month, this is all do us, and kind of just not get over spiritualize this whole thing. But God is just as much active in everything that's going on now as he was before March, and he will be for all of eternity. So that was my first kind of.
Yeah, I think that for all of us, we kind of saw that first month or so as a vacation.
Yeah.
Everyone gets a break. I think of like that was happening right around spring break for everyone, for all the students, and for so many people. At Helix High School, for example, they went on spring break. Schools hadn't been canceled or anything yet. Mm-hmm. They went on spring break, and it was actually one of the students there who was introducing me to the COVID handshake, where you tap feet, kind of thing, or whatever, and just little goofy things like that. Yeah. But they went on spring break, and then they just didn't come back to school. For Grossmont, it was a little bit ended. More. For other schools, it was a little different, because it was like, oh, you're going on spring break early. You're doing these things early, but I think like with it being right around that time, a lot of us and a lot of folks kind of saw it as, hey, we're taking a break, versus what it is. Yeah. I think for me, my first point is similar to yours, but that God is faithful.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that we toss out casually, but has become more and more apparent. I think of Psalm 23:4, where it says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." And when you were talking about how, like, well, we kind of just put everything on hold, and we kind of sat back and waited, that kind of thing. It made me pause and was like, yeah, I feel this because
Yeah.
because what I've been seeing is like we can't ignore this, right? We can't ignore this situation. We can't live in like blissful ignorance of it, right, or anything like that. And God is faithful to see us through it.
Absolutely.
There have been problems and difficulties of things that have come up, for example,
Yeah.
that uh, I didn't see how God was going to get us through it. And then he did. Right? There has been, and I think it's so important for us to recognize that this is something to walk through and to navigate, rather than just like, I'm going to ignore it until I like it again.
Yeah.
Can
I brought up a quick like thought that just crossed my mind as you were saying that?
That's kind of why we're having this conversation.
Having a conversation, yeah. Like one of the like a word that just came to my mind was just like even pain has a purpose. And if like this has been a really tough time for a lot of people, and we just kind of want to just like numb it and just like wait for it to pass over. And like as I remember, I preached a message a few years ago to my youth kids about when Jesus was hanging on the cross. And that moment when Jesus was on the cross and they offered him the I think it was like the vinegar mixed with gall, and I know you're a student of the word, like that was something that would have numbed the pain, right? And we know that there was like that 2-part thing of like like there was the prophecy of Jesus has to drink the full cup of wrath, right? He has to like to feel the whole thing. But I just thought about like Jesus when he rejected that offering of like, hey, like, just drink this. It might make the pain go away. Like, just it'll all be over soon. But you said, no, I need to experience all of this. And like as you're saying this and God's faithfulness and God is being so glorified through this, like let's be honest, it's a terrible time for a lot of people. This is a terrible time for many people. It's been terrible I know it's been terrible for you. It's terrifying. It's a terrible time. It's a painful time. But God is still so faithful. And I feel like the same way it's like, for a lot of us, we could just choose to like drink the gall and the vinegar and just be like, whatever, like I'm just going to numb myself and just not think about it and just wait for it to all go away. But the pain has a purpose. We don't just push it away and just put it in the back burner. Like God is, when you said like God is faithfulness, it just reminded me of that passage of like, God was faithful when Jesus was hanging on that cross, taking all that. And we really got to take it all in. So I don't know if
right,
yeah.
And I mean this to do a plug of a plug, right?
Yeah.
Go back and look at if you have time. Go back and listen to a coffee corner we did a couple weeks ago, with one of my good friends, and we talked about the topic was pain isn't always bad.
Oh, and
he's a good friend of mine whose mom died when he was young, born to really unfortunate circumstances. He was adopted by his aunt, and then over the course of high school and right into early college, his mom died. His second mom died, who he called his mom, and like we talked about that and how he had to walk through that. And I think that's so important for us to recognize that this is something we walk through, and the way we walk through it is we are going to be held accountable to, right?
Yeah.
Did you cling to Jesus, or did you hide in a corner with your hands over your ears, closing your eyes, and hiding until it just all went away?
Yeah.
Because the valley of the shadow of death is big and scary, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not easy, and
Yeah.
it makes me really wonder, like, and so saying God is faithful is the God-focused side of this, right?
Yeah.
The other side of this, or kind of our side of this, is how did we respond?
Yeah.
Like now imagine, like flip the circumstance, right? Maybe instead of it being COVID, right? Maybe instead of it being COVID, it was someone who, like, would you respond to like, did you respond in such a way that showed love and grace and mercy towards people? Like, because that's one of the things that we have to think about is, like, as Christians, how did we respond? Would you respond? Yeah. Did you show, like, the love that is obvious for a Christian, or did you, like, rub it in people's face that you had a different opinion of something, right? Like, I think of, when I think of this, I think of, like, mental health difficulties, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think of, like, for the person who has depression, or the person who has anxiety, or the person who has, who has these difficulties, when the person who says, oh, that's just all phooey, go get help, you need to do something else to get your mind off of it, right? Or they respond in an unloving way, it's damaging.
Absolutely.
And it's damaging to that relationship, and it's damaging to people, and it makes me, and it brings me back to this. There's just this idea of, like, how did you respond? Because frankly, there's a lot of people who responded in a lot of ways, that were like, oh, it's really clear that you just weren't directly affected by COVID, right? That you didn't directly have a concern of death if one of your loved ones got it, right? Or that you were blissfully ignorant and you didn't know, right? And it just makes me think of, like, how did you walk through this? Like, you might not be you might not be directly affected by the negative effects of getting COVID, but even, there's a difference between caring for someone and showing them that you care for them, and walking through that and intentionally limiting your liberties for the sake of loving your neighbor.
Absolutely.
Then that your responses might have some damage that you don't even know is happening, because you say, I'm not going to wear a mask, period, the end, right? Well, then for the person who's high risk, there's other things that are related to that, right? Yeah. So my question, just, that comes up, the other side of God is faithful, because God will give you and show you the desire. I don't like wearing a mask, but we do, right?
Yeah.
And that's just one small piece of the equation. But it's like, did you choose to walk through the fire with people? Did you choose to walk through the valley of the shadow of death with people? Or did you choose to camp on the other side and say, I'm going to ignore you until you figure yourself out?
Yeah.
Or
just wait till everyone gets over it.
Right. Depression's not real. Your concerns about COVID aren't real. And then did you act that way, or did you say, hey, like, I understand that there's concerns, and I understand that there's things involved with this that I don't understand. How can I understand this better? And God will be faithful to show you those things. God will be faithful to help you through those things.
Yep. Man. It's heavy. That's real stuff, man.
Well, I think, and this is what's so important, is, like, we as Christians are called to,
absolutely
walk through things with one another. We are called to take on one another's burdens. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to something yesterday about this idea of like burdens and those types of things. And for a lot of people, like, there's general burdens, right? Like, you need to pay your rent, you need to do these things. Like, those are like general burdens. But for some people, like, the threat of COVID is far greater burden than for others.
Oh yeah.
But we need to take on one another's burdens, and I know that it weighs heavy, and but this is part of all of us collectively walking through this difficult time. So
yeah. And I guess I could, that's a good transition to the next lesson that I wrote down after seeking God in the moment, just mentioning that, like, it's been such a divisive time, And it is sad that I feel like no matter where you go, whether in the Christian circle or the non-Christian circle, no one seems to. It's really hard to find people who really see eye to eye on this issue. And so what I wrote down was the biggest thing that God has been teaching me is radical humility towards everybody who doesn't seem to see it this way. Because, for instance, for me, like, I'm blessed, and in my family circle, in my church circle, just about everybody, a vast majority is on maybe the same page as you and I. Like, like most people around me are very like, hey, like we get it, right? Like our pastor's daughter is immune deficient. Our church has a lot of elderly people. Our church has a lot of nurses. The stereotype of Filipino churches and nurses reigns very true at First Baptist. But however, of course, like I said, while there's the majority, it's the minority that really weighs heavier. It's like, even though it's the smallest voice, it's often the loudest voice, and it's the biggest struggle that I've faced, if I can be completely transparent, is not letting the few voices, the loud, the vocal minority, steal my joy. Because even though it's like I know that 9 out of 10 people around me are completely like, hey, like I'm all about it, it's just all it takes is just that one person, those little comments, those snide remarks, like, you guys know that masks don't work, right? Like, that only 6% of these people really died from COVID, right? Those little comments that just completely rob my joy. And it's the reason why I wrote down radical humility is because it's one thing to be humble towards, people who are, just like maybe have a good reason, or like when you're wrong, when that, like you might be on the wrong side of things. But I wrote radical humility because it's when, like, deep down in your gut that, like, the people who are, going against me, the people who are upset or saying these things that are upsetting me, like, they're hurt. They're, like, this has affected them in negative ways. They lost their business. They lost, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's affected their ministries. It's affected their lives in a really negative way. And it's so hard for me to try to humble myself to love you when you're saying these things, and to not just be full of wrath and frustration towards you. And it's just like, it's one thing to have humility towards, I don't know, just so many other things, but I feel like this really pushed patience and humility and love to its limits, was those people for me. Because again, it wasn't as many. I feel like you might be surrounded by a lot more of it than I am. Like, I really don't hear a lot of it, but whenever I hear it, it weighs so heavy. Like, I told the staff recently, I lost my uncle to COVID a few weeks ago. That was really rough.
I remember that.
Like, my mom was devastated. I came to my parents' house and I saw my mom literally on the floor because her brother-in-law had passed away, and her sister still had it. And I don't know if you read this. I read statistically, Filipinos are more likely to die from COVID than any other Asian race. We have bad immune systems. We're we're not the strongest, healthiest race. We're very sensitive to these things. Like, we've lived in a pretty, like I said, we're kind of germophobic. Like, we live very sterilized lives, and that's just the reality of our people. And I still remember the day my mom called me and said, I was preaching the next day, and my mom calls and says, hey, like, I lost my kuya, I lost my big brother, like, please come to the house. And I was driving, and of course my heart was broken, losing an uncle who I missed and I love dearly. But if I can be completely transparent with you, my heart was also maybe more than it was full of empathy and compassion towards my mom and sadness for my family. I was full of wrath. Like, I was so angry.
Did your uncle pass away because of COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
So and of course, like,
I wanted to be clear with that.
Absolutely.
About that.
Yes, and like just like everybody else, like the whole stupid was it just COVID? No, it's never. It's rarely just COVID.
Right.
It's like I don't want to get into the science of it, but you and I both know it's rarely just COVID that kills anybody. But it's definitely the trigger. It's definitely
Right.
a huge part of it. So yes, he had underlying conditions. Yes, he wasn't the healthiest person, but he would still be alive if COVID wasn't a thing. At the end of the day. Like doctors, like every family doctor's like, yes, no, he would totally still be alive if it wasn't for COVID. Like it works with other things. But anyway, I don't want to get too
I
carried
heard an
away.
analogy that's slightly, maybe a little violent,
The
but I
bear
think
one.
it helps it helps do it. No, not that one.
Ah,
It's on its own, a bullet doesn't kill anyone, and frankly, a bullet doesn't actually kill you. What kills
blood
you
loss.
is blood loss and the collapsed
Exactly.
lungs
Yeah.
and the broken bones and the just
Yeah.
all the things that
Yeah.
and the person who might have fired it being in a bad mental spot. There's all these
Yeah.
different things, but this little piece of metal doesn't actually kill you, right? And
So yeah.
and I think that's one of those things that's like you're speaking to it, which is, and I don't want to cut you off. I just want to
No.
I know how helpful it is to
Yeah.
help everyone gather their thoughts, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But it's
Like
one of those
and
things that's like
I read
COVID.
another nurse said something along the lines of like, if I have a bleeding issue, if I have a blood hemorrhage or whatever, like a problem like that, and that's on my medical report, and I get attacked by a bear and a bear cuts me open, my medical report is not just going to say bear attack, just like the whole CDC, they don't just say
Right.
COVID, like it's going to say bleeding and bear attack. But you can be absolutely certain that the bear was responsible for my death. Like even though it's the medical report says, oh, he also had a bleeding issue. Anyway, so back to that night. I was mad, man. Like
Yeah.
I was yelling into my steering, because I'm by myself. My wife is somewhere else. I'm yelling into my steering wheel. I'm banging on it. Like, why are there still people who don't get this?
Right.
Like, how can anyone not want to wear a mask? I don't care. Even if it turns out that the masks do nothing, it's like just for crying out, like, even if like right now I think it might help. If I think this might help, like, can you please wear this in front of me? Like even if if 2 years from now all the scientists say, hey, actually these didn't do anything, cool, good for you, hoorah, you were right. But as long as I think that they might make a 1% chance of helping my pastor's daughter survive or Mike's daughter survive, even if all I can think is this might give them a 1% chance, wear it every second you're around me, please. But so anyway, I was frustrated that night. But then one thing that God was kind of telling me to calm me down, because that was not a righteous anger. Maybe it started that way, but it didn't. It wasn't that way the whole time. Like by the time, it was. I am so mad. I don't want to talk to these people. Anger. I can't grasp these people anger. But one thing God did tell me was, these people, while they're not victims of COVID, like they're hurting. These people are also hurt, and you need to love these people the same way that I want you to love immune deficient people. I need you to love these other people as well, because your heart's full of wrath towards them. And I was just smitten. I was just like, I was wrecked. I'm like, God, forgive me, because I just found myself in such an ugly place, man. And yeah, like you're right. Like I still struggle with it, and I do think it's wrong that people have that approach. One thing that this season has taught me is radical humility, in the sense of there are a lot of people, and whether they're right or wrong at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I need to learn to love. I cannot live with a mindset of like, well, if you're wrong, forget you. And to take it even a step further, because like you said, there's two issues going on. We have a medical pandemic and racial injustice, right? And a lot of people have very strong opinions about that about racism as well. And like I said, frankly, like my opinions are very centrist, and I think people on both sides strongly disagree with me. And that's hard as a people pleaser, because I want everyone to like me. I want everyone to be happy with my views. But they're not. and they say things. Both sides are saying things that I think are very hurtful, and it makes it really hard for me to love people. But I'd say one of the hardest lessons that God has taught me is just that radical humility and love. And hey, even if everything you have to say is completely opposed to everything that I believe in right now and everything I believe in God and whatever, like I can't let my heart be full of wrath. I can't be full of any of these unholy feelings. Like I need to love you because that's Jesus hung on a cross, said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And of course, it's not the same. I'm not comparing myself to Jesus. I'm not comparing anti-maskers to Roman guards. But it's like, even as hurtful as the words are, it's just learning to love that regardless. It's if Jesus could love them, I need to try, and I'm not there yet. But that's just for me the biggest lesson, I'd say. That radical humility and love and compassion.
Well, I think that's it's wild that you say all this, because I probably wrote down the same thing, just worded differently.
Sure.
But I think that what you're saying is key and foundational to our response to Jesus and the world around us, right? Yeah. This is what we see. I mean, I'm literally preaching on this tomorrow. Philippians 3, where Paul gives his laundry list of like his resume, right?
Yeah.
He gives his resume, and then he says, "But I count it all loss for Christ."
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of those things that I would to your point, radical humility. I think that it's important for us as Christians to understand this. Is like no amount of Facebook searching. Honestly, no amount of PhDs and master's degrees, like no amount of groupthink, no amount of acceptance or denial, caution or denial, right? Like all these different things. Like we need to count it all loss for Jesus, and like. Regardless of what your stance is, regardless of how you respond, regardless of all these different things, regardless of how much you think you know or don't think you know, we need to count it a loss for living humbly, to live humbly before Jesus.
That's right.
And I think that's such a good point. I think that that's important. I wrote down a very similar thing. It's probably the other side of the coin, but first I just want to affirm you. Like, I appreciate you opening up about that and being willing to open up about that here. I think that there's a lot of people who, on both sides, who are looking for that person who's died from COVID, right? Like, whether it's the people who are extra cautious, who are like, well, I'm sure there's people out there who are who've died from COVID, clearly, or the people who are saying, well, show me one case and I'll wear a mask, like those types of things. I'm sorry, I see you struggling through this, so I'll wrap.
Yeah, you said the pain has a purpose. We should struggle through it.
Right.
Like I gotta feel it, but yeah, like it, man, you're right. Like it's so true, and it's hard to hear, but this is just life.
Right, and I've known multiple people who have passed away because of COVID or complications from having COVID.
Exactly.
And you are one who's experienced that really close to your family, and I think that's just something to recognize, and that's something to understand that there are people all around you, and this is for the people listening. There are people all around you who are suffering through this situation and who are dealing with COVID, and they don't know, like they don't realize how close it actually is, So for me, my second point was be watchful. Be watchful. because division will come in many forms.
Yep.
And when I say be watchful, I'm not saying look out for other people around you. Yes, like it's somewhat helpful to know who's going through what, and where people fall on the whole spectrum. But when I say be watchful, I mean look inside. Look inside yourself, because
Yes.
because and surrender that to God. Humbly surrender that to God, because here's the thing. You might not think of yourself as someone who's sympathetic, right? To those who are sick, to those who are struggling, those types of things. You might think of yourself as that. But if you are also always looking for counter arguments, or all of your conclusions you arrive at fall in a different category, or this is one that I saw, and this is one that we saw with all the racism things, right? Is there are people who are very quiet about the issues, but then when they found an issue that matched the thing that they were keeping themselves apart from, like that, they responded with the same vitriol as the original issues, right? And that's part of divisiveness, right? Yeah. If you are waiting to say, if you're sitting back with COVID and saying, "See, I told you so," the COVID cases are increasing and the deaths are not increasing at the same rate. Look, ha, I was right all along. That's divisive.
Yes.
Because there's people like your uncle, like my daughter, like your pastor's daughter, who this is a very real threat to them.
Yes.
And when they see you only highlighting the reasons why it shouldn't be a threat to them, that's divisive. And we really are called to love one another.
Yeah.
And this is like we know from James that what comes out of the mouth, the heart, or
the abundance of the heart.
I'm sorry, the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And so like when we're highlighting the things that are like, oh, see, COVID wasn't that big of a threat, or oh, see, like, there are good cops, and I'm not saying there aren't good cops.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when you're silent on some things,
yeah, but
you're only loud on other things, like it's coming from somewhere. And
when you're weaponizing an issue to rub something in someone's face to prove a point, you'll notice you know I'm Baptist by how much I love alliteration, and as you were saying that, I was just thinking to myself, we should be thinking compassion before counter argument.
Sure.
Like, and I think I'm guilty of it too. Is because I'm even on the flip side, I'm constantly my mind. I don't know if you're like me, where I'm just like, I'm constantly thinking of like maybe a conversation I had with somebody, and maybe I was quiet and I didn't say anything, rightfully so, and I'm just like, oh man, if I could go back, I could have said this. Oh man, this would have been a good counter argument. And I'm always thinking of like, oh, I could have said, I should have said, or next time I want to tell this guy this next time, and just shut up and just have compassion is what I just tell myself. Like, John, we'll just stop. You don't need to win any arguments with anybody. God is sovereign and in control. If you're right, God will vindicate you. If you're wrong, God will correct you. Stop trying to win arguments and just try to love people.
Well, that's what this whole thing is like division comes in many forms. So seek truth. And this is what I mean is like, you know what? You might be in a situation where you aren't that concerned about COVID, and you might be living your life in that way, right? But maybe you have a job where you have to be at risk, so therefore in your head you're like, well, since I'm at risk, then I can kind of just go do whatever I want, like I'm already exposed, so like that kind of thing, or whatever these things are. Right? I saw a post the other day of like, a breakdown of the death rates of people who by age group, and it was like 0 to 40 or something like that. 0 to 40 has a death rate of 0.001%.
Oh yeah,
or something like that.
Absolutely.
And then it like ramps up to 0.1% or something like that for elderly and that type of thing. And what I will say is, like, as Christians, right? You might have a thought on something. Seek truth, because if you seek truth, you'll start seeing your personal opinions start to fade, and you're willing to adjust them. Yeah. And that's one of the things, because I think that internally, like, check yourself. If you're like, I'm only going to go to youth group when they don't require masks, well, think about that. Like, is that a divisive thing? Probably so. Absolutely. Right? Like, we're all trying to move around, and be as accommodating as possible, and all those types of things, right? If I think back to the issue a couple months ago of, like, well, I'm only going to go to church if I can sing without a mask on. Like, and that was a big thing a couple months ago here in California.
Yep.
And it's like, well, okay, let's seek truth, because if we seek truth, then I think we will arrive at a different conclusion of what we have to do. So when I'm saying, like, division comes in many forms, I'm mainly looking at the internal, right? Yeah. Like, we know that there's different opinions out there, that there's different political leans, that people have different agendas for all this stuff for COVID, whatever. Look internally. And if you find yourself saying, you know what, I'm only going to do things this way, that way, and, I'm only going to, this is what I believe, right? But if it's not grounded in truth, if it's not grounded in loving your neighbor, if it's not grounded in living Christ-like to those around you, and having true care and concern for people's cares and concerns around you, right? If you're and lifting up one another's burdens, and you're saying, like, hey, to be a Christian, you have to be this way, right? Or those types of things, and you start conflating different things, like, that's a divisive heart. And as we seek truth, and that becomes the more important thing, one, our opinions can change, and two, our responses can change. And you'll find that you're far more open to more. Like, you're far more open to those around you, right? So, I think that's, like, it's, it could be division comes in many forms, but it could, it's, seek, like, look at, like, check your heart, right? But, like, we can't be the ones that check our heart. Something has to, and it has to, and let it be truth, rather than an opinion about things or whatever.
I agree. I mean, it's the reality is, it's really hard to change anyone's opinion. Like, I can't imagine what it would take to convince, like, an anti-masker that they're completely wrong and that they should be wearing it. Like, I feel like that's, it almost feels impossible. But I do like what you said of, like, but what we can expect and encourage as believers is for believers to check their heart and to just say, okay, I'm not going to change your mind. If you genuinely believe that, a mask, it doesn't do anything, whatever, like, I'm not a scientist. Maybe you're right. I don't know, but this is what the CDC says right now. But what I can, what we can say, I think, as Christians is, but where's your motivation for not wearing it? But why do you feel the need? Is that a Christ-like motivation? can you honestly search your heart and search and seek God and have peace, saying like, yeah, no, like God does not want me to wear this, and He wants me to make all of you feel very uncomfortable because He wants me to prove this point. And if you still really feel that way, I don't know. I mean, I don't want. Again, I'm not a big proponent of echo chamber conversations. I don't want. I don't want to live in an echo chamber. I don't want to think like an echo chamber and just like oh, just everyone that I agree with, I'm just going to talk about people who disagree with me because they're never going to hear. Like, I don't know if that's you. Or for, those are those people like that probably aren't listening to the show. So for the rest of us who are listening to this, let's love them. That's the point I was trying to get to. Was just like just as hard as it is, as frustrating as it is when we see them not wearing their mask around us and not believing in it. Like, yeah, those guys. Let's be honest, they're probably not. They turned this off like an hour, like half an hour ago.
Well, so to your point, and this is actually something
Yeah.
that I was gonna say as like a summary point to this.
Yeah.
Is we need to change our definition of how we walk through this with success. And the like, if you are pro mask or not mask, right? Yeah. Like if you are, whatever that is, whether you are, whether you have a, how do I say this? Whether you believe in systemic racism or not, right? Whether you believe in a presidential candidate or not, right?
Yeah.
I think we should really, as Christians, change our goalposts of what it means to actually score, what it means to actually win. And what it means to actually win isn't to convince someone who doesn't wear masks to wear masks, or someone who believes in systemic racism to not believe in systemic racism. What is actually the win is to love them.
That's the perfect summarize. That summarized everything perfectly. Absolutely.
Cool. I think that's.
I love that.
Like that's huge.
So good.
That's like one of the things we need to change what our definition of what it actually means to represent the kingdom here, and it's not to convince someone of their need to love my daughter. It's not to by protecting them by wearing a mask, right? It's not to convince someone to vote a certain way or to believe a certain thing. What it is to love them and show them Jesus. That's because
Mike, I got to be honest, man. I've spent way too much time during the season thinking about how to win the wrong way, and I've just been exhausted.
Yeah.
It's so exhausting, Mike. Like, it's just so many hours of me, crying in this office, just like, what is it going to take for me to change their mind? But what you said is just so right there. Like, that's what God had to show me. Like, that's not your mission. That's not what God has anointed me to do. God has not called me to change their minds. God has called me to love them and to love and to keep loving, others, but to love them too. And I think that, I think once we can all learn that, like, that's been the biggest weight over the last 7 months, is just like, how do I change people's minds? And I think when God finally just revealed to me, like, guess what? You don't have to. That's, like you said, that's not the right goalpost. I think that was just the biggest relief. I still struggle with it.
Oh yeah.
Struggle with it all the time. Trust me, this is the devil just, remember when that one guy said that, like, masks are hard to breathe, and just like that constant, like, the devil's just whispering.
And then it's like, and you want to counter with, have you ever worn a Halloween mask? Or something like that. And it's like, wait, I'm so confused. And you want to get into that argument, and I think that that's one of the things. And I'll pull back the curtain a little bit for people who are listening. As pastors, we have, and this is not one of our points, but I know that this is the case for Joemel too. As pastors, we have a weird burden on us when it comes to a social issue that gets inside the four walls of our church, like COVID, right? Or like racism, is that we are looked to be experts in it, and then to guide people on how they should think about it too. And that's a huge weight, and that's a really hard thing to navigate. But what I will say is that, like, the true win is when all these things are going on around us, how can people love God more and love their neighbor as themselves?
That's right.
Like, that's the true win.
It's a
And
true,
like,
yeah.
so like when I see my uncle, posting, uh, frankly, the complete opposite worldview or
Yeah.
complete opposite response that I have, um, to these things going on. Um, my goal shouldn't be to convince him otherwise. Maybe if some things are dangerously out of line, then maybe
Yeah.
we can bring them up. But like, my goal shouldn't be to convince him otherwise. My goal should be to love him.
Despite.
Yeah.
I love it. That's,
So
man, whoever's listening, let that take a load off, because that's just the biggest relief. Whose turn is it for the last one?
I have one more and you have one more. You want to
Okay.
rock paper scissors for it?
Oh yeah. No, I think, well, if I'm batting top, then you got to take it home.
Alrighty.
You got
So
to bat the bottom. Yeah, you got to get the walk off.
so I have one more and you have one more. So I'll go one.
Yeah.
I'll go once and then you go once. How's that? Um. Or do you have one more? I don't know. Are we doing
No,
this?
I got one. I got one more.
I was thinking snake draft for some reason.
Oh, you're thinking snake draft. I'm thinking baseball. Top,
Yeah,
bottom,
yeah.
top, bottom.
So I mean, how about you go ahead? You go ahead. I've talked a
Okay.
lot
Yeah.
recently.
No, yeah, and I think since it's your show, you should bat in the bottom. You have home field advantage. So, but no. So just to kind of tie in, the last thought, and I think it's a little bit more of a practical thing, is I think God has definitely also reminded and humbled me a lot in the area as a pastor of like what is ministry. Because again, I suffer from, just like every other human being and many other pastors, is I struggle from pride and ego and from all those little things. Like, I don't think there's a single pastor in the world who would say that it wouldn't pump up their ego a little bit if they usually run 10 people and now they run 100. Every pastor is a little inflated by that, and every pastor struggles with separating that from their identity. And then all of a sudden this COVID thing happens, and all of our ideas and our ego of what ministry is supposed to look like completely flip-flops. I'm not going to say that I was like doing everything like amazingly well before everything happened, but it's like, okay, like, I'm at X amount of clubs, I see X amount of students, I go to youth and there's X amount of kids, and it's like, okay, like, maybe it's not where it needs to be, and yada yada. And then this thing happens, and then just everything that we think that ministry is supposed to look like gets flipped upside down. Yeah. And I don't know if you've had this, Mike, but I've definitely had that Zoom meeting with me and my wife and one kid. Yeah. And I'm like, where'd everybody go? Or that Twitch stream with me and one other person watching, and those. And then there's the whole, there's the comparison thing. Like, oh man, that other youth leader down the street, like, I saw 20 kids in a Zoom meeting, man. Like, he still got kids going to Zoom. And then the whole self, oh man, what am I doing wrong? And this whole, and just beating yourself up, and those comparison struggles. But God has definitely had to remind me of what is ministry. Ministry is you pouring yourself for others to see Jesus. However many others that is, even if it's one other. I remember there was one time where we were supposed to have our youth live stream that we've been doing, and when we started, man, we had like 20 kids watching, and it was just awesome. And there was one week where I'm like, there's literally one person in this room. There's one person. I messaged him. I was like, hey, is that you? Like, Sean, is that you? And he's like, yeah. And I think of my niece, and I'm like, hey, are your parents okay with social distance boba? Like, if we go let's go. I'm going to pick you up. Like, get your mask on. I'm going to your house. Like, if you're the only person watching, I'm going to pick you up, and I'm just going to take you out for boba and just love on you if your parents are comfortable with it. There's like little moments, and just saying, like learning to adjust. This whole thing's been adjusting. And I think, sadly, like, one thing that a lot of people have struggled with, I feel like a lot of my pastor friends who are really like, on that side of like, I can't accept this COVID reality. It's because it shook their idea of what ministry is supposed to look like, and it hurt their ego. Like, I don't have 100 people in my service today, and I don't know how to work this Zoom thing. I don't know how to work this live stream thing. I feel like I'm less of a pastor unless I just pretend like this thing isn't a thing and tell everyone to come back. And like, I feel like the thing I want to tell them is like, man, you are just as meaningful of a pastor and as a minister with a room of one person, or a live stream that's choppy and doesn't work and one person watching you. Like, stop. And that's the problem, is for a lot of people, it's their identity and their worth was in that form of ministry. And like right now, if you're not winning with the online stuff, it's that idea that like, oh, well, if I'm not winning with this online thing, then my ministry sucks. I'm not doing my job. I'm not, it's like this whole like, no, man, you're pouring yourself out for the word of God. It doesn't matter if there's, if no one's watching, that's a win. Like today, I went to Mount Miguel for what I thought was going to be 30 people praying. There was a miscommunication because we didn't make a win with the online thing. There was 3 of us. Am I going to say that praying for an hour with 3 of my closest friends was a waste? Pardon my French, but heck no. Like, that's a win. Like, Mike, like, that's a win, man. Like, yeah, no one showed up. But I prayed with my wife and with my intern for an hour. Yeah. It looks different. Everything looks different. But like you said, like, we have to start changing our ideas of what's a win. Because when you're doing ministry, there are no losses. Like, you cannot lose when you're serving the Lord, even if you screwed up everything. You screwed up the Zoom link. You screwed up the Facebook thing. You forgot to invite people. No one shows up. You studied God's word for like all week for this. That's a win. Yeah. You prepped a song and you're going to sing it for God's glory, and no one was there to sing along with you. That's a win. So, I mean, I know I'm getting emotional, but I just think like this whole thing of like, what does ministry look like? And maybe it's easier for me because I grew up in a small church. I'm used to, having one other kid in youth group. So for me, it's like I'm used to this. This isn't new to me. But I feel like if there's one thing I want to tell other pastors who are really struggling with this reality, is stop thinking that if ministry doesn't look like the way it used to, that's like a loss of some sort. Yep. It's not a loss. When you're serving the kingdom, there are no losses. I don't know. Maybe that might be a debatable point. Some people might argue, and I've heard other pastors say like, oh, well, if you fail to organize, you lose. No, you succeeded in learning a lesson. I don't think there are losses. I think everything's every little thing we do for the kingdom's a win, even if we make mistakes. So
all things are can be used for God's purpose.
Exactly.
100%. I'll close it out with this thought, and you actually said it, but I'm going to highlight it because this is my last thing. Is people, like, regarding COVID, regarding stuff around you, people and situations are dynamic. They move around. Let them be so.
Yeah.
But don't ignore them.
Yeah.
So that's a long point. The point is, summarizes that things change and that's okay. Things change and that's okay. Look, let's see. When I think back to my time of loving sports, right? my favorite basketball player of all time is Kobe.
I'm sorry.
I was 8 years old. 2020 has been a rough year.
Yeah.
But I was 9 years old, 8 years old. Kobe was a rookie on the Lakers. We had just moved back to San Diego, and I had to root for a close local team. Kobe was there the next 20 years of my life as a basketball player. I'm so stoked I got to actually see him in his second to last home game. That was special for me. It's the only basketball game I've actually ever been to. But one of the things in my sports fandom, I should say, that I have observed, in my time, is there was definitely a period of time where I didn't appreciate greatness because I thought that basketball should be played a certain way.
Sure.
It's similar to how people evaluate quarterbacks in the NFL, right? It's like, well, they need to make every throw. They need to be over 6 feet tall. They need to be able to see over the line. They need to be this. They need to have this mental, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Doug Flutie, anybody?
Well, but if you go and look at the modern quarterback today, the modern quarterback, all the top 10 quarterbacks, half of them are black. 70% of them have over 300 rushing yards on the season. It's challenging the norm of what that was, and through this whole time, the norm has been challenged.
Yep.
the norm, and this goes back kind of all of them. God is faithful, seek truth, right? Like all these things stay, all those things stay the same, but
Yeah.
like the situations around us, they change and they're dynamic.
Yeah.
And you know what? At the beginning, people were wiping down their cars, and they thought that this was that COVID could be passed through surfaces, and
Yeah.
like all that type of stuff. And now we've learned different things about it. We've
Yeah.
learned that it is more of an aerosol based coming out of your mouth
Yeah.
situation, um, and that's okay. People
Yeah.
who said don't wear masks, who have switched back, or who have gone over to, hey, you should probably wear masks.
Yeah.
It's for a reason. They have a different understanding
Yeah.
now. Similarly, like, and this is a core thing. Like, let people change, because
Yes.
here's the thing: is like, isn't that fundamentally what we as Christians are asking people to do? Is to say, hey, you were lost in your sin, now follow Jesus. We shouldn't have a no, but you're still stuck in your sin mentality towards things, right? You said that you were a fan of this team. You have to stay a fan of that team.
Yep.
You have to be loyal to your wrong convictions despite new stuff that has changed your mind. Right? Like those kinds of things. Like this whole thing has moved so quickly. Right? Like one of the things that's tricky is and I'll admit this here on the podcast, people can hear this, is I had a funky month or so
Mm-hmm.
of being really sad that I gave my kids such patriotic names. I have Lincoln and Liberty.
I feel that.
And as I was looking, like, and kind of learning more about some of the darker pasts. My wife and I have thrown around that Lord willing, this is not a baby announcement, but Lord willing, if we have another kid, Lord willing, if we have another kid, that our boy's name would be Theodore. Because I really like Theo, right?
Good old Teddy.
And I like Teddy, and I like Theodore. It's a fun name,
Yeah.
right? It's a strong name, and but then it was like, but there's also Theodore Roosevelt, right?
Yeah.
Now I need to go back through and like, oh man, he did say some really bad stuff about the Native Americans.
Yeah.
And it's like, oof, like, can I even do that? And like, the situation is that like, we need to be testing. We need to not ignore the things around us, and we need to let situations be dynamic, and that's okay. Yeah. And it's okay for us to have a new understanding of maybe the things that we studied before, right? Yeah. Like, if someone wasn't exposed to the Bible and only learned of science through their state-approved science classes, they're going to learn something different scientifically than what the Bible teaches about the start of the world, right? For example, as Christians, we're hoping for that at least you would have, and this isn't a conversation on theistic evolution. This isn't a conversation of young Earth,
How
old
long
Earth.
did it take?
Yeah, right. Like this isn't, is a day and age. This isn't day age theory. This isn't any of that stuff. I'm not opening that can of worms. But what the whole concept of being a Christian is saying, hey, you were broken before and you need Jesus and you need to change. That this is a constant. That sanctification is a constant transformation towards Christ. And the reality is that there's people around us who are growing and maturing, and maybe based on their understanding of things, or maybe based on their relationship with Christ, their response to all the stuff going on around us might change.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And like, and it's okay to change. And that's one of the things that I want to say. Like, if you're one of those people who's always voted blue or always voted red, right? It's okay to seek God and maybe come up at a different place. It might be, and this is between you and the Lord, and this is a whole nother can of worms, but it might be a signal of growth in your life to circle or to fill in when you vote a box for a blue candidate. If you've always just
Yeah.
done red candidates,
Yeah.
right? That might be a thing, but it's okay to change. And it's okay for your friends to change too, and it's
Yeah.
okay for your friends to have different responses and to respond at different speeds and all these different things, right?
Yeah. And I would even add on to that, like, let's say you think like, oh, I don't know if God's telling me to go that far, right? Like, I would even like add on like, okay, well, maybe that you don't feel like the Lord is leading you to maybe change who you vote for, but maybe at least change how. I want to get these words right because I'm just thinking off the cuff, but your heart, your loyalty. Like maybe you still feel like you need to vote. You still need to vote the way you voted last time or whatever. You still feel like maybe God's not that, but I would say even to at least consider, am I to speak up for when your party is wrong, not be fully, I think someone recently said, like, if you don't feel politically homeless, then you're probably spiritually homeless. Like, stop feeling so encamped in your political party, like, oh, but this is who I am. No, it's not. And maybe if you still feel led to vote that way, because like I don't want people to tune out if you're like, if you're thinking, oh, is Mike saying I need to vote Democrat or I'm not a Christian? Or,
Right, that's
like
not
that,
what I'm saying. That
yeah,
is
not what you're saying.
And I'm not even trying to make this a political thing. I should say that.
Exactly.
I should say that.
But just to kind of clarify that. But no, if you can't even say like, maybe I need to at least examine issues more individualistically, to stop, like living under this tent of like, well, this is my party, and to just look at every individual issue through an independent biblical lens. Speak up when maybe my party might be biblically wrong on something. Be willing to admit when my candidate of choice is acting ungodly, and not make everything about like that. I think to me that's also growth.
Well, so let me move away from the who to vote for real quick, but I totally agree. But let me take it out of COVID. Let me take it out of racism. Let me take it out of politics, and let's talk about. And I'll just give an example from a traditionally Christian thing.
Yeah.
Right. So abortion.
Sure.
I've always grown up. Abortion is wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's been about the end of the thoughts for a long time. You can't kill people.
Yeah.
Just because someone says that they want to. Okay. Mm-hmm. But as I've thought about it more, my stance has, and I should say, it's changed. It's not changed to be pro-abortion and, or anything like that. What I'm saying is my focus in that conversation has changed.
Yeah.
Because I, like, being anti-abortion should also be anti-orphans. Right? Should also be holistic care and support for families and for mothers, right? Or not just for mothers, but for people who are taking care of these babies.
Yeah.
And these are things that I like. That the dynamic has shifted, and that's okay, right? Like I'm okay talking about abortion and why I believe what I believe, but like, what about the kids who are just sitting in the foster system, waiting to be loved, right?
Yeah.
Like, what about, like, so cool, you saved a life in the womb. Did we kill a life because we didn't love it and they committed suicide when they were 8? Like these are hefty things.
You can, exactly.
And I'm not bringing this up to to speak down on anybody. I'm simply, this is internal for me. This is the growth that has happened in me. And the thing is like, I would hope and encourage that we as Christians, as we deepen our relationship with the Lord, That as we seek him more, that as we become more to who he wants us to be and who he's calling us to be, that as we continue to move in that direction, that we will navigate through some of the more complex issues around us. And some of those complex issues around us include COVID, include racism, include
XYZ,
include politics, include social issues, right? Like include all sorts of things.
I would say this just real quick, like you can add compassion to a political view without necessarily having to completely change. Like you said, I'm not saying that I'm not pro-life, but you can add compassion to being pro-life and change the way that looks like. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that you have to be pro-choice all of a sudden, but I think adding compassion to a view and changing the way that view looks like and the way that it walks and talks like. Sorry, I just add that, like, we're not saying that you should change your stance on anything or everything. Maybe you have to, but adding compassion, adding Christian love.
That's a good word, and that's one of those things that, like, let that grow in your heart. I have a few verses from earlier that actually really speak to this. First, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the kingdom of heaven." In First Peter, it says to search for peace and work to maintain it.
It's good.
In Colossians, it says to let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer each person, right? So it's not saying don't answer, but it's saying answer it with grace and seasoned with salt. Like that means to be for it to taste well, right? Like I've heard it said that, like, make sure your words are sweet because you might just have to eat them, like that kind of thing, right? And then lastly, like James says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." And so all of these things are pointing to, like, this seek God, and you're saying it in a way of what is Christian compassion and how can you have that at all times? I'll close with this kind of thought.
I like that.
And this is one that I often think about. Is we're familiar with the fruit of the Spirit.
I've heard of them.
I've heard about it once or twice, right? Yeah. We've heard of the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control.
Yeah.
What if I told you that these are not all separate fruits, but these are, if we are to think of them as descriptors of one fruit, right? So I want you to imagine for a second an apple. Yeah. This apple, what are the characteristics of it? It grows on a tree. It has seeds on the inside. It usually has white, fleshy fruit.
Yep.
It is usually firm. It usually has skin, right? Now think about this, right? Well, okay, it has skin. Think about your favorite apple. My favorite apple is a Honeycrisp apple.
Oh, same. My wife got me into that.
They're literally the best. But, like,
they're also the most expensive.
They're also the most expensive. It's the worst.
Yeah.
But okay, what does their skin look like? Well, it's actually kind of yellow red with streaks on the outside.
Yeah.
Really crispy, really sweet.
Yeah.
Seeds on the inside, grows on a tree, right?
Yeah.
Well, if I told you that if I gave you 3 descriptors, seeds on the inside, has skin, grows on a tree, right? Well, you could arrive at a pear.
Hmm.
You could arrive at a peach. You could arrive at a Granny Smith or a crab apple, like a really sour apple.
Yeah.
Versus this sweet, delicious, huge apple. Usually those apples are giant.
Yeah.
Right? When we think of the fruit of the Spirit, what we are to be defined by, right, is all the descriptors of the fruit of the Spirit, rather than just some of the descriptors.
I have some of the fruits. Yeah.
Right, or I have some of those attributes. Look, a pear is pretty close to an apple.
Yeah. That's good. I never thought about that.
But, like, and that's the thing, is, like, we when we seek God, we're looking to have all these characteristics, not just
cherry picking what fits your personality.
Look, peace, goodness, and self-control, I got those on lock.
Yeah.
But
that's because that's just easy for me and my personality, yeah.
Right, but, like, a lot of people who are very entrenched in their hard views have peace about what their hard views are. They're not really conflicted on the inside about it.
Nope.
Right? And they believe that they are good. Right? That they are good in having those views, and that, you know, they pick their spots. They have self-control about where they express those views, right? But the thing is that we're called to have all those attributes to arrive at the specific fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of being a good person, or the fruit of looking like Mother Teresa, or the fruit of, you know, like these seemingly good things.
Yep.
So
I like that.
So for us, and I want to encourage people today, like, you know, I want to have Joemel on here. Kind of our prompt was like reflections on COVID and the things that were going on around us, but ultimately, let us live like, let us be the people God has called us to be.
It's good.
And that comes in many forms. So, Joemel, before we do closing thoughts, could you recap your 3 points in bullet points?
I exited it out, but yes. The first one I wrote was something along the lines of seeking God in the moment. Pain has a purpose. I think that was kind of the bullet point, was that. The second one was just radical humility and patience. Just loving and just letting all those people, no matter how angry they make you, viewing them above yourself and loving them. And I think the last thing was what does ministry look like? What does it look like? What is it supposed to be? And it looks very different for everybody, but don't allow the devil to tell you that yours is worse and you got to change everything, or you got to whatever your views to pump up your ego. This egoless ministry, even if all you're doing is just encouraging one person.
Yeah, man.
Egoless ministry.
And mine were, God is faithful and consistent through all things. Mine was then that internal division comes in many forms.
Yep.
So check yourself.
Yourself.
Check yourself and seek truth. And then third is that people and situations are dynamic, and it's okay to change.
I like that.
So
I think I used to say, if you're not ashamed of who you were 2 years ago, you're probably doing something wrong. Like, if you're not constantly, like, every year, like, ashamed of who you were 2 years ago, like, there's something wrong with the way you're living. And maybe that's like a stretch.
That sounds like the Fundy in you talking. Like,
maybe.
Like,
well, no,
I would pretty close to Puritanism here.
I would just say definitely not, because I don't think I think every Fundy is proud of how they are all the time. Like, oh yeah, 2 years ago I was preaching even harder. I wish I could go back to those times.
Okay. I'm a little less exposed to that.
I think it's just the sense of being dynamic. I think we should just constantly be dynamic, and just growing. Like, you know, if you're not ashamed of your state and you haven't grown in 2 years, you know, that's
the idea, is that we are, and to put it, I guess for me, I like to put it positively, right? Like, which is,
I put a negative spin on it.
Right, and I do the same thing. So this is a practice thing, but like, look, sanctification takes transformation.
Yep.
And transformation takes being different than who you were before.
That's right.
And that's
All right.
Well,
Yeah,
cool,
that's
man.
good.
Thanks for being here. I
No,
really
thank you so
appreciate
much for
it.
having me.
It's
It's always an honor.
yeah, it's good stuff. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything? Anything you'd like to plug before we head out?
Sure. If you don't watch the UIC show, check that out on YouTube. It's really funny. I'm kind of a comedic genius on there. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh wow,
Um,
okay.
no, it's almost like a bit that I put on. It's just I just compliment myself a lot. It's all fake. It's not me.
Okay,
It's,
buddy.
it's, it's, it's just a personality I put on. Check out the UIC show. It's funny. We have a worship night at the church. I don't know if you ever heard of Kingdom Seeker. It's a clothing brand based out of San Diego. One of my buddies runs it, and he does a little worship night once every couple months. We haven't done one in 7 months. It's outdoors. It's in our church's parking lot. Everyone is expected to keep their mask on while singing. Everyone is expected to move their lawn chairs 6 feet apart.
Where is it?
We're going to do. It's at our church, First Baptist Church of Spring Valley. Yes,
And
if you
when is
Google
it?
that, tonight at 6 p.m.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Man, if
So-
I wasn't finishing up my message for tomorrow, I'd love to be there.
No worries. Well, I mean, if you end up making a little bit of time later in the evening, we'll be there from 6 to 8. And yeah, if anything changes, feel free to come by. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 big plugs. Check out the show. Come to the worship night if you're free.
Cool. Yeah, and then I'll just say, like I say at the top, make sure you're liking, all these various things on Instagram. That you hit the heart button here on the Twitch channel to make sure that you're following.
Yep.
We are here
I've done
every
that.
Saturday morning doing Waypoint Coffee Corner, talking about relevant things, talking about things to help you grow and things to help you grow in your faith and think about different things. Lastly, this is a completely unrelated plug to everything, but KB, Christian rapper, who honors the Lord and with his music, just dropped a new album. So if you guys are looking for some new tunes, he's got some fire on there. There's a song specifically that I would love for every person in the church to hear called Dark Skin. And there's a line in there where he's talking about the realities of what it's like growing up black, and he talks about his daughter who in a pool one day was trying to wash the black off of her skin. And it just made me go, wow. Like, wow. There's some stuff around us. So there's perspective on it. That's just one of the songs. There are others that literally cover worship songs that we sing in church today. So it's super awesome, super great. I do suggest it. So if anyone's looking for some good
check
music,
it out
that's pretty good stuff. So that being said, we're going to close it out for the day. Thank you for hanging out for Waypoint Coffee Corner with Mike and today's guest, Joemel. You can find us all over on the socials and everything, and we'd love to talk to you more. Until later, we'll catch you on the flip.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.